Keith. How you doing?
Hey, Daniel.
I love working with you guys.
I was going to say, you have some history with us. We've been
Yep.
one of the biggest fans of Into the Badlands.
Yeah. I
And
much appreciated it. I love talking to you guys always.
yeah, no, I'm very excited for you. And before we get into your role in Reminiscence, I did want to say, you kind of led the way for this wave of Asian American martial arts superstars. Like Into the Badlands broke ground, and
Right.
people used to always complain about like martial arts being a stereotype. But I love that you and everyone in your wake with like Louis Tan and Shang-Chi coming out with Snake Eyes, Henry Golding, like Asian Americans kind of like embracing martial arts and not running away from it anymore. It feels
Yeah, we
stereotype.
should embrace that because that's one of the strong points of our culture. I know people that don't know martial arts, hate that question. Oh, do you know martial arts because you're Asian? But it's something that we should embrace because it's a really proud part of our culture.
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to say thank you for Into the Badlands and
Sure.
everything you did there.
Sure.
But let's talk about Reminiscence because, I think your role in this film, I don't know if you know, but we run a podcast on the Nerds of Color called Southern Fried Asian.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's kind of like, that's kind of what you tapped into for St. Joe. Talk about your character in Reminiscence.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. So St. Joe is a very complex three-dimensional villain. And that's why, I accepted the role because Lisa Joy, when she called me and told me, she's like, I know he's a villain. I know it's kind of stereotyped to have an Asian guy play a gangster, but I want this guy to be much, much more than that. Right. And so we're going to take that, twist it on his head and make him this really memorable villain. I'm like, okay, I'm in. And one of the things she said specifically was like, I want to demasculate the Asian American male, right? Because oftentimes we get emasculated on screen, right? And so you get the girl, you have the girl, but also you're this tough guy, you're scary, you're sexy and attractive and seductive, and on top of all of that. I go, okay, I'm in. I didn't even have to read the script because I understood her agenda. This is the struggle that we've been having as Asian American males, for many, many years now. And to have someone, on our side, obviously because she's Asian American, but to think about those issues and try and make a change is kind of amazing. So I was like, I want to be part of that. I'm totally want to do that. And so that's what we did. And then I saw the script and it was just amazing. So with St. Joe, he's all those things I was talking about there, but also, we talk about how there was a war that happened, a civil war, and people like Bannister, a white guy, got to fight in the war. But a character like me, person like me, was put in a camp. That makes me think of the Japanese intern camps, right? Where, 200,000 Japanese Americans were put into camps because they were afraid of being traitors during the World War II, right? And so things like that, help form who this guy is. It probably made him harder, made him put a chip on his shoulder and made him angry. And then when he got out of the camps, when the floods happened and the camps were, fell down and he was able to escape, he then became a survivalist and became a leader in this underworld that he learned to survive in. And so all those factors kind of make this guy this kind of larger than life character. And then on top of that, this kind of Southern accent that we talked about. I was like, I've never seen an Asian American character on screen with a Southern accent. It's very rare that you see that, but I know those people exist. I've met them, and it's really trippy when you do, right? Like it'd be cool to have this guy because he's in New Orleans. Whether he's from there or not. Because when I was filming Badlands in New Orleans, I started picking up a Southern accent just because it sounded so cool, right? And you just kind of do it out of empathy to want to feel like you're local. So I was like, this guy, if he's trying to come up in this underworld and feel ingratiated into that community, he's probably going to start speaking like that. And so we did this thing where he has a slight tinge of this accent. But in the end, when he gets killed, that last line he says, there's no accent there. So it's like this mask that he's putting on to play this character, St. Joe.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, if it was, because I know that you filmed a lot of the first season of I think second season was more in like Europe or something.
Ireland, yeah.
But the first season, I know you filmed in New Orleans. So I was wondering if, like, was it something you brought to the role, or was it something like Lisa had written into the character that, like, he's this like New Orleans, Louisiana?
No, she wrote all the like Chinese English mixed together. She wrote that into the role. But the Southern accent was my idea. I kind of been dying to do that for a long time now. it's staying in New Orleans and like in hearing that accent, just seeing how beautiful and melodic it sounded, but also meeting a bunch of Asian Americans that grew up in the South and speak that way. It's very intriguing and very interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think that's absolutely right. That like the idea of Asian American stories tend to be coastal, right? Like New York,
Yes.
Chinatown, the Bay Area where you're from. It's rare that I mean, that was a revolutionary thing about Minari last year was that like,
Mm.
a story of an Asian American in the South. So I just love that that's another layer to your character that I definitely picked up on when I watched the movie. I was like, holy shit, Daniel's doing a Southern accent. That's awesome. Um, but you talked about working with Lisa, and I did want to touch on, I was at the trailer, press conference, the one that had all the technical difficulties a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about working with your first Asian American woman director in Lisa. So just quickly, could you talk about what that was like to work for Lisa?
Like from our very first conversation on the phone, like she's very smart, Harvard grad, a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. And she could easily be someone who's like so intellectual, you can't even have a conversation with, right? But she's super down to earth, right? And on top of that, her Asian American experiences, we had so much commonality that it felt like I was talking to like my sister or a really good friend that I've known for a long time because of that. And so there's a shorthand between us because of, that we're both Asian American that was just there. I don't know how to explain it, but it was just there. We didn't really talk about it, but it was just there, right. And it made things really easy to collaborate on and all that kind of stuff. And this level of comfort, like I felt really comfortable working with her. And then when she was on set, watching her command that set, it's $100 million movie. It's a big set. We have big movie stars and crazy crews and all that kind of stuff. And she's leading this team of people, to do this crazy movie. And she knew what she was doing at every moment, could answer any question anytime. I was in awe of her. It was cool to watch her. I would just sometimes just sit on set, watch her, give direction or whatever, say what she wanted with the camera, blah, 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 and see that and just go, that's awesome. That's really cool to see.
Especially because it's her first big feature. Yeah. I know she directed episodes of Westworld, but to like, as you said, jump on this Warner Brothers $100 million movie and knock it out of the park. I mean, I know she kind of is part of the Nolan family, so there's a lot of, to live up to, and she's definitely up there with her.
That's extra pressure to deal with, but she was able to do it. And also this movie is complex, it's like so many genres mixed together. And then you have this kind of love story on top of it all. It's so many things and it's hard to pull that off.
Yeah.
She was able to do it.
I did want to ask one more thing. I know we're running out of time, but without spoiling anything, you have this massive fight scene with Hugh and Tandaway. Can you just, and Lisa directing, can you talk about, like, you have experience with a lot of like fight choreography, and Hugh's fight choreography and Tandaway's fight choreography is probably a little bit different than what you're used to. Can you just talk about what that was like doing, choreographed fight scenes and how Lisa directed that particular fight scene in the film?
I really like that scene because despite all the like CGI and stuff that we have in the movie, that was done like old school style with like practical effects, like with blanks and squibs and
glass shattering,
all that stuff was real. We did it in practical. The only thing that was fake were the eels, but we tried to do it real with real eels, but apparently eels are nocturnal, and so they were asleep at the bottom of the tank, so we couldn't use them, right? But he was down to put his head in the tank with the eels. So it was all like, it gave me these vibe of like working on Hong Kong movies in the 90s when I was there, like the late 90s, early 2000s, like when we couldn't rely on technology and you just had to use all these practical ways to pull it off. And that's what we did. We did it this really practical way, and it was a lot of fun. It wasn't very difficult for me because I didn't have to flip around on wires and crazy like that. But it was you're anxious because there was a tight coordination of people with different skill levels that different experiences. And like, for example, blowing the tank and the water coming out, you can only do that in one take, really. And everyone had to be, on point to make that work. And it's awesome, rewarding when you can pull those things off and not rely on CGI to do it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the highlights of the film. So congratulations on that, Daniel. Congratulations on all your success. It's so great to see you thriving in Hollywood, and
awesome.
Can't wait to see what comes next.
Thanks, Keith.
Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this.